Irrational Radio.
Create something.
Don't do the face. Stop with the ugly face. I hate the face.
It's pretty good.
I am a wooden
Accidentally.
leg. To my left here is Shady Ankle Bottoms, and to my right is Mr. E. We are the bold
Hi.
gods of Irrational Radio. If you haven't heard of us, now you have. And it's for teaching people how to DM and giving some of our own perspectives on the craft of DMing, as well as some interesting topics and stuff that we come up with along the way. Between the three of us, we've been playing a variety of role-playing games for 35, 40 years. So it's a long time. I might be greatly inflated, but it's still a lot.
Pretty close, I
each of us
think.
about 15 years, right? So
Yeah, that's
oh god.
It's 45.
Yep.
Like right there.
Yep. Yes.
Aaron, put that fucking background away.
Fine.
I
Okay.
hate it.
I can't. I don't want.
It's so terrible. It's
I don't
like
want people to know how
it's
I
like
live.
it's trying to
I know it's.
attack you, and you're holding it back with your inner light.
It's a mimic. It just
There we
hasn't
go.
quite figured it out.
Whoa!
Oh,
You're in
God.
your house the whole time? Oh my god!
The entire time, but it's still a
I
dungeon.
was immersed.
Yep, it's still a catacomb.
It's just,
So-
it's the office.
Wait,
The
yeah,
dungeon.
exactly.
Every dungeon has an office. That's how they start.
different place. Anyway, today our topic is how to tell a story, both in role playing and kind of in general. We got some interesting topics that I have kind of touched on in the old Table 13, but not a lot of people watched that or were involved in the conversation, so I don't feel bad repeating myself. And for those of you that had watched Table 13, I repeat myself all the time, so it's fine. It's okay. We're just going to jump right into it.
And thanks for coming back.
Yeah. Thanks for coming back. And for the new people, thanks for being here. The first thing that we kind of want to touch on here is, role-playing is a new, or not necessarily new, but in terms of other art forms, it's very new. It's between storytelling and movies and radio and television, it's one of the newest, I would say. Though you could make the argument that old style storytelling, like around a campfire, is the original role playing. I mean, shit. The Greek playwrights used to sit around and pretend they were the gods, and that's how we got the first plays. So,
And
yeah.
I mean, in a lot of ways, a lot of the backbone of improv and acting it is a similar, or at least comes from a similar vein. I think in a lot of ways, there's
Like
dice
around-
and stuff like that. But
Around the camp. I mean, if you look at systems that are less math based,
Mhm.
Think Fate or even like Everyone is John or whatever, they're basically literally just that. They're just exercises, basically.
Yeah.
Like improv and storytelling
or
exercises.
Microscope. We've been playing
Right.
that a lot.
Which there's no dice in that.
No.
yeah,
It's
There's just a
literally
structure.
just structure, yeah. So I don't know. So is that what you guys think makes role playing work? Is the structure, or would you? I don't know. Is there room for role playing without structure, or is that just turn it into storytelling, like
I
group
have some
storytelling?
experience. I have some experience doing that. Some of my friends were trying to put together a system that basically used very, very minimal rule set. Their goal was to make a rule page that was just one page, and
Mhm.
that was it. And to make it simple. And my problem with that is you very quickly run into kind of a meaningless slew of story, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
So-
it's very open, and you could do a
Shitty.
lot with it.
We got a side comment by him Outdorumu-chan, who's asking, what is Microscope? And you're the one who's played the most out of it out of the three of us, so why don't you just give us a quick description of it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Microscope is like a world building game. It basically takes building a world and puts a few rules on it, so that you can play it with multiple people. And essentially, it's like you're popping through this timeline, creating events and things, and sort of tying them together. And I think what it does a really good job at is that it takes, when you make a story, there are a ton of what's the word for it? Very like common story hooks and
Mhm.
things.
Tropes.
Tropes. There we go. Takes a lot of tropes and then you just make this mess of like 40 different things you've read elsewhere, and it's here. It does a really good job of destroying tropes by basically you only get to make like half of a thing. You know,
Yeah.
you make an event, and then somebody else makes an event that ties to that, and you sort of build this weird, wonky, twisty thing out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think at some point in Table 13 we'll play a game.
Oh, that'd be
and
really cool.
kind of sit down and explain the rules and sort of walk through kind of the process. There's a lot of that, like I explain, and then there's chunks where you actually role play as
Mhm.
characters.
Well, you can. There's the
sort of-
option. You're not forced into it, though.
right.
You know, you can play a microscope game with no role playing whatsoever. And,
I don't feel like you don't,
It's like
don't get as
build
much
it.
out of it that way.
yeah, oh, you really don't.
It
Like,
works.
The coolest
but,
parts, I think, happen in the role playing. Like, it's really a great way to build a history for a setting, for a campaign, and then you run in another system like 5e.
Well, it's a great like improv exercise as well,
yeah.
just to like get people into the skin of like a new role playing concept
Mhm.
very quickly, and you rock through it in like 2-3 minutes, and then it's over, and then you're on to the next concept, and that's the other part of it that's very nice.
Right.
It's a good one.
So yeah, we
But
highly
yeah.
recommend that. But
Nice.
like I have heard and talked about like so kind of moving into Dungeons and Dragons territory in specifics. I have on our D&D or D&D memes or like some Facebook groups, you hear a lot of people talk about how the story comes either before or after the mechanics of the game. And then like in 4E, you had almost like a death of the story just for mechanics. I've been doing a little research
I'd
into
argue
that
that.
too.
I think
And,
that was the general opinion, but I
Right.
think so. Yeah, but I've got a whole spiel. I mean, I hated 4E when it came out too, but that's a whole rant I could go on. That's probably a separate topic.
But regardless of that, what do you guys think about like 5E in terms of like storytelling versus mechanics? Is like because a lot of people they expect a combat like once a session, but our podcast we have like one combat every 6 sessions or like every season almost. So it we don't use the mechanics of 5e as much as some games do, and so I'm just curious. I mean, I kind of know where you guys stand, but the rest of everybody might be interested to hear your thoughts on like the balance between those two aspects of the system.
Well, I think that 5e does a pretty good job of putting rules on roleplay in a way that's fairly streamlined and easy for people to sort of learn and get into it. I don't think that a lot of people going into 5e come from 3.5 or 4e, and they're looking for a combat sim. They're looking for what D&D was, and it's
Mhm.
nothing like that. But you look at Pathfinder and the grappling mess that is
the table,
page and a half of
the grapple
rules about
table,
grappling.
yeah.
Right, and
Just
and
Google
people that play
Pathfinder
Pathfinder.
flowchart if you don't know what we're talking about. It's
It's
pretty
horrible.
comical.
Beautiful. Beautiful thing.
But that's not to say that there can't be good story in those systems with lots of math.
Mhm.
It's just I think 5e tried to do away with some of that math to try
Yeah.
and push forward the ability to do more storytelling.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think if you get into a group that's big on role play, like our groups are,
Yeah.
then there's not time for combat. Combat's
Right.
stupid, and I hate it. But it's time consuming, and I'd rather be exploring my character and other players' characters and kind of like forming relationships between the characters, or exploring something in game that isn't hitting something with a sword, especially in 5e, because there's not as many options in 5e.
No.
I would, say the same thing there. I guess, that's sort of the with 5e. It's combat's not like if you're looking for a combat sim, 5e is maybe not the best game to play. I think 5e is a good balance between having enough complex and unique things that you can do in combat to have like an interesting and individual character, but still be like Shady's saying there is to kind of focus on the storytelling elements by streamlining a lot of the overly complicated floating modifier stuff that was very common in the previous editions.
Yeah. 4E was really rife with those floating modifiers. And 3.5, in some ways, in some respects, you were able to like stack many positive and negatives on top of each other.
3.5 was, real bad. 4th edition, they streamlined a lot. It just, it was video game me was
Right.
the complaint with a lot of people, but they, I mean, honestly, they closed the gap between martial classes and casters better than any other edition in D&D has ever done before, because everybody, the power system put everybody on the same playing field.
Yep.
And they also made it like, if you were open-minded enough to look at it as all these is functions you perform in combat, it doesn't change what you do out of combat, then it's just, there was a way in which simplifying combat did direct people toward the role-playing side of the game, and I think that it was just like a failed attempt at what 5e did much more successfully.
Yeah, I agree. So we got a question here kind of along the lines by Crazy Old Bags. He says, say you're running a game for new players and want to encourage more roleplay and collaborative background / world building. What are some things the DM could bring into the next session to try and focus the campaign away from hack and slash or murder hoboing and more towards roleplay story development? He says he's asking for a friend. Wink. So I have a few strategies for this, because I really enjoy like creating a atmosphere where people spend most of the session role-playing their characters and less trying to kill things or even want to kill things. Because they're too afraid of like the risks that are involved because they're inside the role playing. And so one of the things that I find is really helpful is to encourage role play as there's a couple of strategies in terms of like what you can do in the next session to encourage more role play. Is don't take there's in English we have the show don't tell rule, where you want to describe a scene or someone doing an action rather than telling the reader what they're doing. So instead of like the man walked up to the bar and ordered a drink and then he sat down at the back table, you say, the man walked up to the bar, looked at the bartender and said, I need a drink, whiskey sour. The bartender turned and, then you have a conversation rather than just a list of actions. And I see a lot of DMs allow characters or players really to treat their role players treat their player characters like race cars, or more like a video game where you go up to an object and press X without actually having to do the work of interacting with that object. And you as a DM can force them to interact with things as if they were in the world rather than controlling a sprite in the world, by really getting into it. If they walk into a shop, describe the shop, and then if they say, I'm going to walk up to the bar, describe how the bartender interacts with them and stay in character as the DM. And you'll find that you'll generate a lot more role play that way, especially if you're like, how can I help you, stranger? And then they're like, oh, my character, says that they want to drink, and then you react as if they said that, and eventually they'll get into it.
Who's my character?
Yeah, exactly.
My nose is bleeding.
Yeah, the nosebleed is a great place to.
Well, I think a lot of and not all of it. I think some people just aren't into role play, right? But those people aren't watching this because they don't give a shit, right? But I feel like a lot of people who want to like role play and have trouble role playing are in that position because they don't feel comfortable doing it, And I think, it's the same thing that, because it's weird, it's different. It's not, unless you're a theater person, you don't spend a lot of time pretending to be other people.
Or a DM for 15 years. That you wind up being a lot of people that way too.
Or a con man like me.
Yeah, I was going to say pathological liar.
Yeah, right. We all get from different places.
Right, it all just converged in D&D.
Beautiful.
No, but I think you playing as the characters in the world as the DM and showing them that this is acceptable, I think will help bring them out of their shell. I mean, but some people just want to be there to listen to it, and those people are going to be They're just gonna, if they're having fun, they're having fun. That's great.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That's that's
Doesn't answer Bags' question.
Sure.
you
So-
kind of dance around the issue a little bit.
I was gonna say, I think so. Like in the session, that's gonna be sort of without doing what Kyron's suggesting. Is like kind of just basically, hoping for a monkey see, monkey do kind of situation where if you continue to act in, a way and addressing them in character and go down that line, I think like if you mention out a character, like, hey, I was looking for a couple pieces here and there about your character's background that I could maybe try and tie in, and try and talk with them about hammering out some sort of detail bits. That's like a relationship or a regret or, one of those classic dagger kind of things. And then, that kind of stuff I think can help a lot too, because then you've got them halfway there before you introduce it at the table, because you've talked about what they want to do, and so they're already on board. You don't have to sell it in character, because there is that sort of difference. Like there's you can come to an agreement as a DM and a player about stuff that happens to the character that's sort of distinct and separate, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sort of piggybacking off of what Kyron had said with sort of doing the show them a scene instead of tell them a scene. You can sort of reward them showing instead of telling in a way as well. Where a lot of games that I run, if you give me a good reason, like you want to do something and you explain to me how you're going to do it, and I think, well, that it doesn't make sense that you'd fail that very easily. I won't even make you roll, or conversation checks and things like that. The less skill rolls and the less out of combat rolls, I think the better for role play. It helps sort of get people immersed. As soon as you say roll the die, people are like, oh yeah, I'm back in the real world rolling dice.
Right.
But if you can keep everything sort of flowing in this imaginary world, then it's easier to keep people interested in role play.
Absolutely.
The only other thing I had that I sort of wrote down was XP. XP has been rewarded by killing monsters for so long that it's like that's your incentive to level up just by killing stuff. So I always do milestone, and I would just suggest everybody do milestone because.
If you're gonna do XP, then you need to make if you want narrative investment, you need to make sure that that's just as rewarding in a mechanical sense as combat is. Otherwise, it's going to be much easier to just say, "Well, I'll go kill a bunch of random commoners or something, or start a fight with the guards or something."
I kill the town.
Yeah, exactly. Because because I'm like 500 XP away from a level, and I'll just kill a bunch of commoners, and finish this off here or something, instead of if I finish out this whole deal I've got going with the Thieves Guild, then it'll get me there too. That's I prefer milestone, because then you can just say, oh yeah, this is a big milestone, and you guys all progress significantly.
Right.
The name came from.
It's weird.
Right. Yeah.
It's almost like it's really fitting or something.
But yeah, I would suggest milestone as well for that specific reason there, because XP really does force combat unless you make the XP rewarded throughout a combat. But then you have the problem of you kind of have the problem of homebrewing monster XP. Like how do you figure, is talking, a queen out of something less XP than a king, or less XP than a noble, or more,
That's like a system that's really difficult to quantify.
Right.
Killing monsters is one thing. Doing X is literally a billion things.
Yeah, exactly.
Any number of, it could be difficult, it could be easy, but the other thing I think I wanted to say that I almost forgot, and I just remembered now. The one thing about, I think, if you avoid too many skill checks, you mentioned that you're saying that you want to try and avoid skill checks, it pulls people out of the immersion, and I agree with that. And that was fucking 5 minutes back, but welcome to my brain, folks. And but the issue with that, I think, is some classes, especially D&D, but in most games there are skill-based classes. And if you don't roll those checks regularly, then the characters that are built to like benefit from that kind of stuff mechanically don't. And then like, the fighter who has no social skills whatsoever is just as effective because they're a strong personality as, the bard who's got jack of all trades and, expertise and all that shit.
I feel like that's
But
where you kind of have to trust your players, right? Like
It's
for your
it's
fighter
exactly
not to be
moderation in all
like,
things
pick
kind
the
of.
lock.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I mean that's it's, but I think in talking stuff it does come across sometimes too. There, people take persuasion, deception, intimidation, and I love handling those things without getting into rolling dice when you can. But I also usually play characters that don't have that great of modifiers on that, so it benefits me.
Right.
Yeah, and kind of along the line of the skill checks, especially the charisma-based skill checks, where it's kind of hard to balance between like people that might not be able to talk very well or might not have as high of charisma as their character, and trying to balance or people that like the very intelligent person who has low intelligence on their character,
and vice versa,
and vice versa. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I tend to use skill checks when they're explicitly trying to use that skill in order to create some kind of advantage for them. And then using that skill check to inform not like their role playing, because I still require that they role play, but I like to use that to inform the player or the NPC's reaction to what they're trying to do or what they're saying. Because then, like if you walk up to someone and say, something incredibly offensive to that person, there's a small chance they might react positively because of some strange coincidence in their backstory.
They just happen to think it's funny
right,
or whatever.
Like there's that scene in Liar Liar where he walks into the boardroom and calls every board member a piece of shit, and the fucking boss loves it, And it's just,
everybody's like, oh. And then
and he gets fucking promoted because he was the only one to say everything. So you can have the situations where a character with very low charisma or very small chance of succeeding rolls
trying to say
in
Jim
20.
Carrey has low charisma.
Yeah.
How dare you?
No, but I'm just pointing out
that
that you can. It's not the dice rolls determining what they say, but it's the dice rolls determining the reaction, so that they can role play however they want to, and you can still have the skill points have meaning.
I agree with that. That's the thing is I like if you can bring them into not just it's a cold success or failure necessarily, but it sort of just directs like I guess their standing, or you know what I mean? It's like their outlook toward the thing in the first place, or like I guess was it the Age of the Apocalypse games or whatever, the Monster of the Week and stuff, they've got the like conditional successes. And like, like you've got to do something for me right now kind of thing. Stuff like that is sort of the way I look at like, okay, they didn't roll super hot, like, or they rolled really shit. It's like, oh, fuck off.
So Bag's got a follow-up question here. I feel like I introduced the battle mat to a group while they were really new, and now they sort of rely on it. I feel that slows down the improv role-playing aspect as well. How do I balance the theater of the mind with the Final Fantasy Tactics vibe that I've unintentionally encouraged since our first session? So, my straight up suggestion would just be design encounters that don't require a battle map or are actually like harmed with a battle map. Like one of my favorite ones is like a fucking court case. Like a battle map isn't going to help any characters win a court case. They're going to have to actually like do research and or a mystery. They're going to actually have to talk to people and do role-playing things in order to find out the answer to the riddle or the mystery in the town, or the free the noble that's been wrongly imprisoned.
So you're saying do like more non-combat encounters,
right? Yeah, exactly.
Something that that's but if you're doing combat, if you keep combat to where it's not complicated, so instead of you're attacked by 16 town guards, that's a pain in the ass to keep track of without a battle map. But if you have them fight 3 elite soldiers, then you can sort of keep track of who's close to who. Another way to do it is because feat is a construct that is not like foot, but like measurements of space are a construct that works really well on a battle map and not super great in the mind space. Um, you could try to, and this is difficult because a lot of stuff uses distances in D&D, but like 13th Age is a game system that is similar to D&D, but it tries to take away a lot of that mathy stuff. And so they will do like stuff has a range of nearby or
Yeah.
has a range of close or like intimate range. I think Monster of the Week does that too.
I was gonna say, yeah, they're
And so it's much easier to
along
keep
those.
track of like who you're close to, who you're far away from, than it is to like I'm 15 feet from the goblin and I'm 25 feet from a cliffside. And you could try to place some sort of um, ranges of space that would be considered those things and kind of translate your game into that. But it's kind of something you'd have to sort of start that way instead of like forcing people into suddenly in the middle of your campaign.
Or another thing you could do is take combat sessions, like you said, and simplify them down to, like there is a artifact in the center of this room that is emanating this energy that, and then that is like offensive in some way. You have an orb that slings just fireballs, and they have to figure out a way to destroy this orb. You don't really need a battle map for that, as long as everyone understands the orb in the center of the room and you're over here, your party's over here. Then it's just a matter of, are you guys clustered together or are you not? Because a battle map isn't going to make that any easier to work with, I suppose.
And a battle map isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No,
I think
no.
if you're not using it outside of combat, then you should be okay. But if you're
Right.
if like, I think Dags is almost saying like they sort of are using it outside of combat as well, which there's absolutely no reason to use it outside of combat.
I just
It's not a
I
board
would say don't make maps functional in that way. I would get, or at least your regional map, like make a map of the city that you don't like, it's too big, or it's too zoomed out to put a token on really, and you can kind of just draw X's or label buildings and stuff like that. And then only get like a true battle map when you're rolling initiative.
Yeah.
And I mean, even if that's because there's some like personally, I'll throw a grid out, like if it's like anything that I roll initiative for usually. And that's probably my preference, but it helps order things, and so I don't think it's a bad thing to use a map whenever you want to keep things organized, everybody feeling like they're getting a fair shot at accomplishing whatever the goal is that's time sensitive. But like obviously outside of combat, I'd try and avoid too many battle maps, because that's just a lot more work for you.
Yeah. Oh man.
I would really just do, because it sounds like they're, according to what he said here, that they're asking to draw out locations and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I would really just step backward and sort of say, sorry, just sort of say, this isn't really a board game. It's not really the intent for us to sort of move our pawns around this, and I'll describe the scenario to you, and you guys will have to kind of use your mind to see what these look like.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's something really complicated or like a puzzle where you're trying to move stuff around, maybe it would make sense to implement something. There are going to be times where they'll probably ask you to do that because they're confused, but if you give them the 5 senses and all of that when you describe an area, it's going to do 10 times as much as a battle map would anyway.
Yep.
I agree with that. And then I think that's the other thing, is if you just don't use maps in situations where they're not in combat, and then even if if they're in a tavern, some random tavern they pull up in that you didn't plan on them being there, like whatever, it gets into a bar fight, just you can switch to a grid and draw a box if you're using Roll20 and say this is the inside, draw a couple circles that are tables, and draw a box that's a bar, and like you're done. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just needs to be able to convey the meaning that you're like basically trying to get across, and the ideas will get that.
Yep.
I use letters, tokens that just have letters on them a lot in my games because it's like I can use them for whatever, like arbitrarily assign crap to people. So it doesn't have to be pretty all the time. It's a game of imagination anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be my suggestion. Is if you make it
Exactly.
less pretty, it forces them to.
So kind of, I guess moving on to another topic here, but still kind of piggybacking off of Bags' questions. Another thing that you can do to really engage people in role playing is to have NPCs that are helpful to the party in ways that make them like a valued member of the party or a valued member of the city they're visiting. Give them some kind of value that's not just mechanical value, as in like, oh, this is where I get my health potions. Make it so that like this person or this NPC is really good at talking to the guards, and so we got to keep him out of trouble so that we can use him to get in good with the guards in the city. Or, in Dragon's Paralandia, we had Jessie, and she was the only one who knew how to take care of the dragon eggs. So you guys, like, took her along, and she was very valuable in ways that, which I eventually made her a character sheet so she could take place in combat. But she didn't have a character sheet for a long time, but it really engaged the party to role play with me as the DM because there was, like, a player character that was me, but not me at the same time.
I've felt that a lot lately. There's been so many times in games that I've been running where I feel I wish I had a character here. If nothing else, just to take part in the RP with people.
Yeah.
Having a body sitting around is nice. Like DMPCs are, you don't want a babysitter in the group, but it's good to have someone that the party cares about that you can use as emotional leverage against them.
Yeah.
And that is a fun character to role play for you too.
To run off what Kyle's saying, they really do have to be pretty much incapable.
Yeah.
Not necessarily
basically incapable,
but not
that's
not
comedy.
good enough to make any of the players feel less.
Yeah, they can't outshine anyone.
Well,
they shouldn't be outshining anyone at any.
They should really be kind of like a master key that only fits one kind of lock that your characters would be. That way they're like useful to keep around, and you don't want to make them too annoying or too much of a card or too disruptive, because then the party's not going to want to take them with you or take them with them just because. But so you got to find that sweet spot between like likable but still like funny, powerful or useful but not they don't outshine the player characters. In fact, they ought to be weaker than the player characters so that the player characters can like feel like they are needed for this NPC to survive. And you got to really tie the story into the NPC to make it like worth the character's while to keep this person in the party, even with those two things going on.
Yeah. And that's like, I think that's part of having like valuable NPCs, and I guess, continuing the whole, fostering an environment that's good for RP. I think that's part of like having a dynamic setting that's like still logically consistent. Like you want people that are running around that, because that's what your character is going to interact with more than the environment is like the actual NPCs, and you want them to be like changing and want stuff of their own and like to fear things and stuff like that. Have their own abilities and concerns and whatnot, but then also like be connected to the actions that the party's taking, and so that they can kind of see the way that they're impacting the setting as time passes, sort of, and that gives that sense that starts to lead toward emotional investment basically into your character and the story.
Yep. You really want to avoid the arrow over the head NPC in your role playing, because it leads to players treating the NPCs like objects, or treating the NPCs like money bags, or just like quest givers, or like things to interact with to continue the story forward, but don't really have any life beyond what they're doing right now. It's really important that your NPCs that live in your world feel like they got other shit going on other than what the role players are dealing with,
and they're not just like sitting there waiting for someone to come up and hit A to animate them or whatever.
If a farmer needs you to find, or is looking for someone to find herbs to heal his sick daughter, if the party passes by him in a village, he's still gonna find someone, or she's gonna die. He's not gonna sit there and try to find herbs for 6 months as you guys deal with the keep and then find this side quest again. It's
like, oh yeah, we needed to get this guy herbs, and he comes back, oh thank God, you just got here just in time.
It's just like that Skyrim shit,
Yeah, exactly. It's just it's been 30 seconds, of course, yeah.
I need you to go save this man. Okay. And 36 hours of game time later, oh shit, I forgot all about that side quest, and then nothing has changed. You really want to avoid that, because, like I say a lot, there's some storytelling things you can do in role-playing that you can't do in any other kind of storytelling medium because of this kind of thing that we're talking about. These abilities that you have as the storyteller to really involve the audience, which are your role players, in the world.
Yeah. And then I think, that sort of opportunity cost thing is something that that people love seeing in like video games, RPGs and stuff like that when it's there, but it's just really hard to program without someone who's sitting there on the couch, able to actively redesign the game as you're playing through it. So like tabletop RPGs are uniquely set up to already have that kind of thing built in. And I think that is like one of the big strengths that people go to these kind of games for, is that kind of impact that, as a player, being able to leave a mark on, the world that you're fucking around
in. Just any kind of setting, just to be able to change something in the world that wasn't either that like you decided to change, because I've heard of a lot of campaigns where it's just like you're railroaded into killing God. But if your character has no investment in that, it's just a cutscene. It has no emotional import to you.
Right.
But yeah, should we jump back and answer Himartur? I cannot pronounce that name. The question that was asked above.
Himotomaru.
Asked, how do you feel about Nat 20s being auto successes?
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really derisive question sometimes. Divisive.
Could be derisive.
Yeah.
Ooh, Umaru-chan. There we go. Yeah.
It's Umaru.
Umaru.
It's Umaru.
Hey, we recognize them.
Hey, buddy.
Hey.
I didn't know that was where that came from.
Anyway,
I think that it's a terrible idea. I think that
there's not going to be much argument.
Yeah.
I think that doing natural 20s being instant successes is...
I'll be right back. I'm going to start coffee.
A way to sort of... I was thinking about doing like a 5-minute break when...
Yeah, well, he's fucking gone now anyway. All right. Back into his kitchen. We will take that 5-minute break because I want to drink coffee too. But go on. I'm sorry.
Okay, sweet. So... focusing back on what we were talking about,
natural 20s,
right? So it's a very good way to like tear your players out of immersion by giving them capabilities that are beyond the natural functions that your person can do. I think if it's possible for your character to do it, they should be able to do it on a 20.
Yeah, but so that right there, and like that, you bring up a question. Okay, so if it's not possible, then why are they rolling? If it's not possible, they shouldn't be rolling. But if it is possible,
honestly, I would tell them that this does not seem like something you think you could do at all.
But that means that nat 20s are successes, because you just said that if it's not possible, they shouldn't be rolling, and if it's possible, then they have to be able to succeed. And if they can't succeed on a nat 20, then they shouldn't have been rolling, right?
But like a
I mean, I guess that's
20 isn't
semantics,
any
right?
more of a success than a 19 is. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
See,
somebody who
that's-
only has a +1 isn't going to succeed on a 21 because they rolled a 20 if the DC is a
I'm
25.
splitting hairs here because like they ask
Yeah.
auto successes, not crits. You know, because
Right.
like I don't
Yeah. It's
skill
like rolling.
crits are not a thing. Like that's you don't get to pick the lock any harder because you rolled a 20. It just opens because you succeeded the check. You don't the queen isn't going to throw herself at your feet because you passed the persuasion check with an at 20. You're just going to convince her of the threat outside her
There's
kingdom.
talk about like it's a pretty standard thing that like by 5 or better or by 5 or worse is like a
Right.
significant success or significant failure. But so they do have some amount of conditional successes or conditional failures.
But
I mean,
I
that's
guess a 20 doesn't
everything.
make it any more special than
That's
an 18 on an
my
8
feeling
DC.
anyway. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If you have a 13 plus 7, is the exact same as a 20 with no modifier.
Right. Exactly.
And it's like if you walk up to a castle and you say, "I'm going to pick up this castle," right? And you're like, "Okay, roll a strength check," and they roll a 20. They're not going to pick up.
Right.
They just don't like hurt
Yeah.
themselves or
Yeah,
something.
right, yeah. Well, like in my
But then you just don't like.
Yeah, they
But
shouldn't have been
typically,
rolling,
in that
you know?
situation, I would just be like, "You're not going to be able to."
Right.
It's
Right.
just not physical.
So then crazy Bags asks, are ones the same way? Now I treat ones as automatic failures because if I'm never gonna make a DC that's lower than 5. I'm not gonna
You
make
can
people
get
roll
a
on that.
+9 at level 1 with a
Yeah.
rogue on your skill. So I'm saying, so like a 1 is a 10.
Okay, that's
Like-
true.
Yeah, like
Now,
that's
yeah.
why that's.
I don't do automatic failures on ones because then
That's
your people are failing 5% of the time. They're shooting themselves in the foot at one side of every 20 times that they shoot. And I think
Mhm.
that in combat it can be funny. If
Right.
if conditionally there's a situation that you can make them be kind of comical or whatever, then you can use the natural ones to sort of do that.
Right.
and get away with it, I think.
Punish
But,
melee character or martial characters more than spellcasters,
guess-
though, and they don't need that.
Yeah. I guess like when I say ones are automatic successes, it's like if the rogue has a +9 and the DC that I've set is 10, I'm not going to make him roll that because he can't fail. So there's no reason for me to roll.
But everybody else in the group might still be rolling.
Might still be rolling.
So
and
you
if
just take a check from everybody,
Right.
and then if he gets whatever he gets, then who cares? But like everybody else
Yeah.
is still mad, and that's I think it like.
Right.
Yeah, there are going to be situations where, and obviously if they don't need to roll, they shouldn't be rolling. But there's
Right.
going to be situations where you get a roll from everybody, and they
Yes.
roll a 1, and they should. I don't feel like they should just fail because they were doing, effectively taking part in a group check that they would have otherwise not had to roll for.
I
Right.
mean that's true, but if their modifier doesn't get them over the DC, it doesn't matter. Like if they roll a 1 or a 2 or a 3,
Right.
they're going to
like
fail.
if you miss the DC, you miss
Right, you
the DC.
fail. I don't
Well,
make
like what-
ones critical failures, unless it has some kind of funny aspect. Same with 20s. There will be a time where I will maybe put a little stank on the skill success because they
Mhm.
rolled a 20, or some like,
Yeah.
this kind of happened because you rolled a 1, and you literally failed the DC by the maximum amount
Mhm.
you could possibly have failed it by. But I tend not to overuse those mechanics. So I guess I kind of definitely like sit on the fence a little bit more than I talk sometimes.
It's a case by case, which
Mhm.
is
It really is a case by case.
dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous to say that because it's almost no advice at
Basically
all.
don't. I try to avoid it because for the most part, I just like you wouldn't get in a car if there was a 5% chance you were going to wreck it.
Right? Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yep. That's kind of the trouble with because I'm more versed in hero system, which goes off of a 3d6.
Well, yeah, because that's
And-
like a 1 in 36 chance or something.
yeah,
not
exactly.
A fucking
It's
1
like
in
1
20
100 and
or
something.
It's quite a bit.
is it? Oh, it's 3d6, not yeah. I'm
it's
thinking craps.
3d6. Yeah. So it's very, very rare that you roll 3 6s or 3 1s, critical success, critical failure, and it's that system. Those don't happen very often, so they become big special things. Whereas
God rolls.
God rolls, and then in D&D, the failures and successes at maximum level happen much more often. So I still
for
carry
people
over
who
that
aren't
effect.
familiar with hero system.
Right.
You roll 3d6. I'm not sure if we actually say whatever 3d6.
3d6.
And if you get a
It's
1
so
on
it's
all
like
of them,
54% of your rolls are 11 or less.
yeah,
Yep.
like between 7 and 11.
And then it's
basically.
like as it goes, further away from 11, it's much smaller
Rarer.
chance that you'll
Yeah.
achieve that.
The less multiples you have in those stored in those numbers, the less.
and
likely
rolling
it is.
low is good, which is
yes,
weird.
rolling low is good. But not on damage. You want to roll
Well,
high on damage. But
yeah, but for everything else,
everything else. So you're trying to get under numbers instead of above them. But anyway, so I carry a lot of that with me when I DM for D&D games, and I guess I do kind of put some stank on both. Like Bags says, I think that it is, you do have to treat both of these rolls, 1s and 20s, the same. Otherwise, your players are going to get frustrated.
absolutely.
Yeah, you can't.
And you have to,
Yeah.
and where you sometimes utilize it and sometimes don't.
That's right. Yeah,
There's got to be some trust and agreement
Yeah.
between you and your players, so
Yeah.
that people don't feel singled out or left out or whatever.
that's the concern.
Yeah.
And
And-
that's where it gets dangerous.
And again, it's all about having fun. So if your table is like would be disappointed at you taking away like the critical skill roll, like critical skill successes they've been used to you giving, don't take it away from them just because you want to like stick closer to the rules or you want to take our advice or something. If your table enjoys it and it doesn't get in the way of their fun or your fun, the same way, keep it in there. It's not hurting the craft or anyone else if your table plays it a little bit differently. But if it becomes a problem, that's when you gotta look at it.
Which, if 5% of the time they can convince the king to give him
Right.
the crown, then
Yeah.
you're gonna have some problems.
Yep. Because we're not sponsored yet.
Or if you're not following us, give us a quick follow. You'll get notifications when we go live. If you like kind of the stuff we're doing here, we run some games we run 2 games on Twitch right now. Karen does a bi-weekly game with the community, and Kyle West in the chat here actually does a game every other Monday called Gods of Aether. That it looks that's got a sweet trailer.
Super cool.
And we've got a
Super
Patreon.
cool.
We have a Discord channel where a bunch of games are played, and,
Yep.
and I think probably everybody who's in here is in the Discord. But if you're not and you want to be cool like the
Get
rest of
on
the
in
people in the
there.
chat, then get in the Discord. There's a link below for that. Other than that, we do a bi-weekly podcast that is awesome, and we've got
Dragon's
like
Barrel
14
idea.
episodes released. As of tomorrow, it'll be 14 episodes, and you can sink a whole bunch of time into listening to that. So we will be back, and
It's over
Thank
a day of audio.
Yeah, it's a lot of audio, and we have a lot of fun. I'm the DM, and these guys are in it, and we definitely have a lot of fun with it. Some silly
All right.
business that goes down.
I
Great
hate it.
time.
I hate
Yeah,
the
he
entire
hates
thing
it.
so much.
He's lying. He doesn't
He's-
mean that.
He really enjoys it. He better. Anyway, 5-minute break. We'll be right back.
5, 10,
10-minute
10.
break.
So it's a
5
10-minute
to
break.
10-minute
yes.
break.
10 minutes.
10
Roughly
minutes.
5 or 7, a 7
Right.
minute break.
7 works.
7.5.
Can we go now so I
Yep.
can go finish making coffee?
Bye, everybody. We'll be back in a little bit.
The world is full of danger. In every environment, there lurks hidden terrors waiting for their chance to strike. Dr. Gregory Parsnips and his team of hardy adventurers have faced some of the worst monstrosities the world has to offer. And lived. Read their harrowing tales and deeds in Dr. Parsnip's new book, a collection of tales detailing the deeds and courses of Dr. Gregory Arthur Parsnips and Company, featuring a multitude of terrifying and monstrous creatures with which conflict is had. Get your copy today.
We're back.
Are we
Hey.
back?
From outer space.
Oh my
We're back.
God.
We're back, everybody.
Kyle,
Hi.
thank you for the gifted sub.
Yes,
That
thank
was-
you so much. That's
You are now
awesome.
the top.
Big
You're now the
Cal.
top gifter, and
Big
I'm
man.
happy to. I'm happy to have you as my top gift.
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah,
Whatever that means.
it's a top gift.
It's like Top Gear.
Yeah,
Yes.
or Top Gun.
Metal gift solid.
Metal gift solid.
It's
All right.
That's good.
So we
All right.
were talking about natural ones and 20s.
Natural ones
But we
and
had an
20s.
outline.
Yeah.
I think we were trying to follow at one point.
no, we weren't. Don't lie.
Yep.
We were never trying to follow that.
No.
I thought like a fool that we would, but
No,
I don't know why.
I
Whatever.
just said a list of bullet points just in case. You know, just in
As if he
case.
didn't know I was gonna come back with
Right.
fucking
Four
almost
pages of
of
goddamn
outline. You didn't think that was gonna happen? Come on, you know.
So I guess we can kind of move down.
We don't actually have to.
No, I'm just gonna skip into another topic completely.
What
Good,
kind of was your
excellent.
day?
So hiding roles as a DM. What do you
Oh,
what do you think? Is it a necessary part of the game, or is
I'm
it
a cheater.
Is it
I'm a
dirty
I'm
cheater?
the biggest cheater when
Yeah.
it comes to this stuff.
I don't. Oh, sorry.
I cheat so bad. I can't. That's why I hate using Roll20. That's
That's
why I like to roll on the desk.
Uh-huh.
And I don't cheat to win, right? Like that's kind of the there's kind of a stigma between like the DM and the
Yeah.
player fighting
Yeah.
each other or whatever. It's not about that. It's about making a good story. It's about making
And it's
something
not about
exciting
that
and
because the
interesting.
DM will win every time.
Well,
Well,
you're
right.
fucking
and,
God.
and it's
so
and there's no
yeah,
it's there's
that's not
there's
a
no
fight.
point. It's not
Right.
fun. That you're
It's
not
Calvin
making something
Ball.
fun.
Exactly.
Calvin Ball, right? So I'll hide rolls just because. Imagine a situation where you're fighting an orc, a big old orc, and it's you and,
Yep.
and two other level 1 characters.
So it's a Thursday.
What?
I'm just-
Okay. And you've hit him and you've hit him and you've hit him and you've just for like rounds and rounds and rounds you've been fighting this guy, and you can tell he's almost dead, and so one of your players, he jumps up and does this like triple backflip and pulls out a fucking giant cloud sword and does some kind of finisher move, but it doesn't kill the orc, right? Or he misses the orc,
Mhm.
or having the control to sort of like, now you hit him and he's dead, kind of thing. Gives you a little bit more closure, a little bit more,
It's more like payoff for the players.
right. So it's not like this thing that just fell flat, like it
Right.
didn't do any good.
I prefer to laugh at
Right.
my players when that happens. But I genuinely hope that it's with them for the most part. Try to, like instill an atmosphere where that's like funny when you fail. That we're all sitting here trying to like succeed and blundering through, being the best heroes we can
Right.
and doing miserably at it. But but I guess like I like not so like if I'm gonna cheat. So if I told you that I rolled the dice on my own, I probably didn't. And it's not because I'm trying to cheat, it's because I'm just grading it based on your skill score. Like if it's a competition, I'm just not bothering, because if you roll over like 15 or whatever, depending on the situation, we'll call it good. But it's not worth like, oh, they happen to roll a 20, fuck you kind of thing. Like,
Right.
I'm not. So I get that, like where you, like what Brett's saying is where you kind of want to let something that they're trying to accomplish happen. But in combat, I'm always, I'll like, oh, that sucks. Sorry, you crit.
Well, time to roll.
Remember that you can avoid most shitty
Yeah.
things by fudging HP or fudging AC.
Well, or just conditional changes in combat, like
Yeah.
oh, they now are more interested in this than killing the person that they were fighting, or this new twist on the situation means that they have another objective, and so they've got to get this box out of the room behind them or something.
Now,
Yeah.
I kind of am in Eric's camp where I don't like fudging rolls for combat or skill checks because I think that like as a DM it provides some kind of trust between the DM and the players.
Right. That's why I try not to do it.
But I will fudge the hell out of AC, creature abilities, stats.
Oh, we know.
Oh man, I will like just be like, oh shit, this guy isn't rolling real well. I'm just gonna add 3 or 4 points to his to hit modifier here in the middle of combat, and oh look, he's now a
Suddenly
threat.
he's adding +4, more to his attacks.
So I will do that all day long. But I feel like that's like that's my prerogative as a DM. I get to.
You're allowed to.
Yeah, I don't.
I will say, as a player in those situations, it feels like, well, okay, if you can just change the, whenever, like, why am I bothering sometimes?
That's why your players can't.
It's
like,
not
none
freedom
of you guys
if
watching
my
now
actions
can
don't
play
actually
in a
dictate
game of
the
mine
action.
because
Ever.
I don't
Yeah,
know what I
right.
do, and
Well,
the veil has been pulled from
yeah.
your eyes.
What's the whole point of Table 13 is to kind of pull back the veil and see like, oh look,
And
it's all
ruin
a
our
mess
ability
back
as
here.
DMs.
Yeah, this is a dumpster fire that just happens to cast a shadow that looks really nice.
Yeah.
So I guess the point is, what I do when I fudge roll, and I try to be fair about it and let the players roll on their table too, because typically I play with people I trust. In the scenario
That's
where
what it comes down to.
But it's as long as you don't make it seem like you're trying to fuck people over, and,
Right.
and I normally I'm interested in making the story interesting and making it fun for the players, and not about winning or making it hard or whatever. Unless hard is what you want or hard
Right.
is what it needs to be there.
Mm-hmm.
It's but you have to make the players think that you're still being fair.
Right.
And I mean, and you are. And most of the time I go with the roll unless it's something that, is going to kill your character, kill one of the characters or something, and it's my fault that it happened.
Yeah. If
I
I
accidentally
fuck
pitted
up
this level of
and
level 2 party against a goddamn
Wait,
Leviathan.
what happened to Clogged Mountainhead then? Why didn't you fudge that roll?
Because
it was you.
You were dumb.
It was me.
Yeah, you were like, I want to go hug a sword demon.
Hey. He looks
He
like
had
he
swords
needed
for
a hug.
arms. I tried to get him out of there, and you were like, no.
No,
I would
I'm-
rather stick my hand inside of this giant pencil sharpener.
Yep. I got sharpened too. But he went down to become a martyr for most of the rest of the campaign.
Oh my god, he did.
Yep.
I'll go help the farmers in the sky.
Yeah. Oh
No,
man.
But and that was
That's
before,
why you
that
don't
was
fudge
before I was
rolls.
fudging
Stuff
anything.
like that happens
Yep.
if you don't fudge rolls.
Yep. And that's the kind
If
of
you do, it's sort of there's a way to do it without taking away player agency. But I think you run the risk of putting yourself in a position where the outcome of this situation is kind of predetermined if you let
Right.
yourself go too far.
Yes. And I really like how Bags put that, is that it's like adjusting characteristics or abilities on like during combat is a lot like a mixing board. You're like, oh shit, this person really wasn't like optimized not against the party but to make this fun,
Right.
So I'm going to adjust these things slightly to make this combat more interesting or more fun, or to fill the time that I need it to fill.
I think the issue is when you're trying to do it in a way that the players don't notice and they do, you ruin a bit of that like atmosphere of trust. Whereas if you just kind of say, well, shit, I fucked up a bit here, boys, boys and girls, whatever. And, now need to tweak this a bit. And like all right, everybody, this is like now going like this. It breaks the immersion, but you maintain that sort of like, hey, sorry, like I'm a human who's trying to have fun with you guys too, and I screwed up and I'm trying to rectify it kind of stuff. And that's, I think, a good thing to have at the table.
Yeah. I will have to agree that communication is always, like, I will always say communication is the best way to do it, even if I don't always abide by that rule.
It's easier said than
It
done.
is
That's for
way
sure.
easier said than done, especially if it's like the first 2 rounds in combat. You're like, oh god, this guy's gonna get
Mhm.
booked if I don't increase his AC by 4 points. And
See, I just
yeah.
I'll either throw extra people in, or oh well, he now has like a fucking thing in his belt that lets him get away or something stupid.
Right.
Usually, if it's like, if I'm gonna hand wave him away, I'm gonna go full bore, and nobody's gonna be like, oh wow, it's like, but then it's, if you do stuff, if it's reasonable, like if you have an intelligent enemy, like they would take reasonable precautions. Like if they, magic's not a rare thing in your campaign, then they would take advantage of stuff that is magical to help them or to insulate themselves from the risk of other casters or whatever. Like if you didn't, you'd be a shitty bad guy.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Shitty
enemy.
Yeah, that's one of those. It's like, oh well, I'll I don't know, use divination to find somebody. It's like, well, okay, but like if somebody's in the business of kidnapping and they're like pros, like they're just gonna put them in like they're gonna line the room with lead or something.
Yep.
And it won't work. They're gonna take basic precautions that you would take if you knew how that stuff. Because if you've been caught, by that shit before, you're not gonna get caught by it again unless you're a bad criminal.
Right. That kind of goes into the world building a little bit, like you want to prepare encounters and things that make sense to the world that your characters are in, so that it makes sense for the combat to run out like it does. Like you said, if magic is really big in like the world, it doesn't make much sense for, like you said, like kidnappers or an archmage not to have defenses against the spells that the characters would have, mostly
stuff that level 2 casters are gonna have or something. You know what I mean? You should, that's basic. It's gonna be common.
Everyone who can cast spells is going to be able to do that. And so this is something that I see a lot, honestly, in not just role-playing, but a lot like in stories and stuff. Like if you have a spell that is able to send a message 10 miles, then there is no need for runners. You just have a wizard set every 10 miles and just send a chain of messages faster than any bird could fly or any horse could run.
Right.
And it
within reason, because it's got to be worthwhile. You got to be paying those wizards enough somehow to make it worth their while to not be doing whatever else wizards would be doing with that ability. You can make some
really interesting world building choices with that too, though.
Yes.
So
you can make some sort of Pony Express organization or
every 10 miles that are enchanted with that spell.
Yeah, like it's exactly just set up a magical cell phone network. Yeah.
Wizard net. I love it.
Shit, I don't have any signal. We're not close to the wizard.
Yeah, how many bars?
I haven't put up any wizard towers out here.
2 wizard towers.
It's rods? I don't know. I'm trying to think.
But yeah, that kind of goes in there. And I kind of coming back to what we were talking about here. Fudging rolls, adjusting characteristics, or even like what you said, Eric, adding more people into the combat or changing the scenario in a certain way, I think is really the like a skill that a DM must have, is the ability to change things on the fly in order to make the situation as fun as possible.
Absolutely. Because you can't wait until the end of the session all the time. Or you can, and it works as if you're getting feedback from your players at the end. But I feel you'll have more fun, or you'll be able to provide a more fun game if you're able to kind of read it as you're going, and like, okay, shit, like this is going to be over in 2 turns, and it's supposed to be a pretty climactic fight. Like something needs to change here, otherwise it won't be what I'm wanting it to be, kind of thing. It won't give the payoff it's supposed to.
It also kind of goes into how you plan how the session is going to play out. Like you can't railroad your character. You really want to avoid doing that, and so you have to be able to, like, okay, well, they didn't talk to this guard who has all the information. So, you have to, like, all right, how do I keep this story going? How do I keep making this interesting?
Yeah, how else can I drop these hooks in some other way that they'll address and be able to solve the problem still?
Exactly. And so it's like thinking on the fly and adjusting every part of the role-playing session in order to make it as much fun for your characters as possible. That's really the goal. And Bags, like, to avoid them murdering the lore NPCs, since you have a lot of options for.
I don't commit NPCs. Well, I
Right.
try to not commit NPCs to being the only ones with certain knowledge until they've already delivered that knowledge. And as a general rule, I try and keep like NPCs setting stuff, slushy, like with a skeleton, but fluid still. Like you like that. Like sometimes detail can be limiting. The more
Right.
you have defined already before you come to the table, the less, well, the more you have to keep track of in each individual situation, the more gears there are that are interacting with each other in the big machine that is your world, that you fuck one thing up and suddenly, yeah, now this isn't acting the way it's supposed to
Right.
over here anymore. And I think that's a concern. If you overdefine your setting, you can help yourself out by or your NPC or whatever. You can help yourself out by leaving some room for flexibility, and defining stuff kind of as you need it to be defined.
Right.
I hate you guys so much. You're talking about.
Is that not?
I do all these things when I make my world, and I'm like, I make a thing when people get there. And
I mean,
there's no story. The story is what the players make it, basically, and what I shit out on the go, and then write about later for a little bit.
No,
that's you
yeah.
already know. I'm just
We're in the
selling
same
it better.
camp. Yeah, exactly. That's but basically why I'm saying you don't want everything written out, because I don't want to fucking write everything out. So I just kind of
and remember everything 100%, and then not be able to come up use this cool thing that I thought up at the table, that like, oh man, wait, but how does that play into the myriad of 100 other bajillion things? Like if you've got a working understanding of the broad strokes, and then basically room to mess with stuff on the finer level, because that's I just try and get with like super arcs and general themes that are kind of background setting pieces, and then maybe throw some people in. But I mean, mostly it's like, oh, you guys want to go talk to the guy who runs this shop? Like, I guess that has to be a person now. Okay.
Yep.
And like, what do you want about him? Oh, well, like, or they had a bunch of fun interacting with that NPC or whatever. Like, oh, okay, I guess like I'll try and find a way to tie him back into a conflict that they're already involved in somehow, or as a whatever barometer for future conflict. Like, oh shit, this is happening to him. That is because we're doing this over here or whatever. So I think, like you can get yourself in trouble by doing too much before you put it into the game.
Right. And then I think that's incredibly important because like, I guess in my opinion, I like building a present, like the moment of the beginning of the role playing, or like a setting that is static in terms of like all the pieces are set up, kind of like a dollhouse almost, where I feel like my very minute detail on like cities, how people how people operate, maybe important figures, and then I let the role players play in the world and make sure that they build it. I help them build a story that's interesting using the pieces that I've taken a long time to put together. So it's I do extensive like setting work, so that I have the pieces that can move when the role players make decisions and act in the world, but I don't try to make a story beforehand. I just kind of set the pieces down and I'm like, okay, what do you guys want to do where you are? That I sometimes run into problems with parties that want to be led, or parties that want like a go here, do this, go here, do this kind of story structure, because I don't, when someone is like, okay, what do we do? And I have gotten nothing from them in terms of like character motivation.
What they're interested in.
Right.
And, what kind of hooks they would pick up on or something.
Right. And it's exactly opposite of like modules. Because modules, all that work has been done for you, and then you're basically like, you have the avenues that the characters can take, and it's not, you got very defined pieces and kind of how those pieces move in the future. but I tend not to like to try to set those up because in the decade and a half I've been a DM and been playing these games, the one thing that I've definitely learned the most is that you can never predict what your role players are going to do. You just can't. You can try as much as you can put big hooks. You can like you can try as hard as you can, but you like in 3 sessions, if you're not railroading them at all, and you're a human, you're gonna end up off of the path that you thought that they were gonna take.
Yeah, that's how we got. That's how Dragons of Paralandia became Dragons
Yeah,
of Paralandia.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
It's because we ended up veering off and taking dragon eggs that weren't supposed to be taken.
That no one
That's sort of the
let
difference
Grot
between
kill.
like fantasy and fiction,
Could have
right?
solved that whole issue already.
It's are your players interested in playing a fantasy or a fiction? Do they want
Right.
to live the world story, or do they want the world to live their story?
Right.
And that's kind of what you're describing, or like how Bag said, sandbox. That's
Mhm.
kind of how I build. I build a place and I build stuff in the place and places, like the cities, and I build factions inside those cities and what they want, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
the players jump in and maybe I make a couple of hooks or a couple of
Right.
events that occur,
Mhm.
but it really doesn't mesh well with people that are like, give me a story, hit me with
Right.
that, that Dragonborn,
Yeah.
the dragon attacking the castle thing,
Right.
and I don't have a high Hrothgar for you.
Right.
All I
Yeah.
have are a
Yeah.
bunch of shitty political factions that want something out of you.
Yeah. You.
None of them are really good guys. Like they're
Right.
all jerks, and
Yeah.
no, that's I agree. Like that's kind of where I tend to work. Is the I guess the department of like I get a couple tropey like hook themes that I want to try and throw them into and like see if you can get them to bite on stuff. It's like, okay, like are they interested in dealing with a thieves guild or putting a thieves guild away, and like so you can throw something like that in there. If they're not, okay, you go back to something else.
Yep.
And then kind of just cycle in stuff and make it tropey as hell, but then you can connect it to the random shenanigans that they're engaging in the off time to make it feel like it's more personal and not this simple super tropey thing, because there are these like sort of real consequences for the role players, because it's the guy that they go to get all the barrels that they need for everything they do. If you're in my Sunday game,
Or the man that builds the cart for you.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, and then those are relationships in character that matter to the players that you can build up and then threaten, kind of.
Yeah.
You don't want to penalize every single one that they build, and you don't want it to be too much threat, not enough like benefit, but like that trade-off is, it's how you build investment and payoff, basically.
Well, guys, we are approaching midnight here, so that it concludes our first Neo Table
Broadcasting
13 session. Yes, new Table 13.
Neo 13. I don't like
Neo 13. Yeah.
If you guys are like wanting something out of this, our typical thing is going to be kind of just talking about DM stuff, world building stuff.
Let's just
doing maybe
bullshit.
some Q&A type
Yep.
sessions. There is a channel in our Discord where you can type in questions for next session if you'd like us to answer those. If there's something else you'd like to see, definitely pop it in the chat in there, and we can try and incorporate that. This is really supposed to sort of be a all-encompassing sort of DM workshop, storytelling workshop thing that we just do every week, and it's going to change and mold accordingly, I think. But
yeah, and you as the listeners are going to get to change it.
Yeah, absolutely. But get in the Discord, get involved in the channels there, and we'll see what we can do with this thing.
Yeah.
If you like what we do and you want to help out, we have a Patreon, and you can subscribe to our Twitch channel here. There is a YouTube channel as well where we have some garbage from our video game stuff, and these will probably end up there as well.
Yep.
As well as the God's Aether games and stuff that are also here on Twitch and podcast.
Podcast.
website.
There's a lot
just put
happening.
2 new dice in our store. Go buy our dice.
Or
They're really cool. One of
shirts,
them
or
goes
They're really
sweatshirts.
neat.
None of us are wearing the
Sweatshirts are
merch.
comfy.
We
Oh
found-
yeah, Jesus. Yeah, crap. Yeah.
I'm wearing
Next
a
I
black
time.
don't even think I
shirt.
have one
Really
laying
popular.
around either.
But
Damn.
yeah, go check out their other streams, go check out our YouTube, and we will see you next week for another Table 13 session.
Peace out.
Bye.